This is all about Bitcoin, a show dedicated to all things questions and markets related to Bitcoin. Little b for the currency and Bitcoin, big B for the network. A collective journey to understand, apply, and use this innovation, all Bitcoin, all the time. I'm your host, Christine Lee. Let's have a live look at Bitcoin right now. The CoinDesk Bitcoin price XVX index is skyrocketing over 10% over the past 24 hours, now trading at $41,356. The most reliable reference prices for institutions since 2014 are now published under the CoinDesk brand, trusted globally as the leader in crypto news, events, and data.
The chart of the day is brought to you by Crypto.com, the world's fastest growing crypto app.
Ruble-denominated Bitcoin volume surging to a 9-month high as global sanctions on Russia trigger a flight from the country's fiat currency. This chart, using data from Kaiko, a Paris-based crypto research provider, showing ruble-denominated Bitcoin volume surging nearly 1.5 billion rubles on Thursday, hitting its highest level since May. Kaiko saying, quote, activity was concentrated on Binance, adding that Bitcoin Ukrainian hryvnia volume has also spiked, but not as high as October levels. BTC to the Ukrainian hryvnia only trades on two exchanges, Binance and local Bitcoin. Similar trends were observed in Tether Ruble and Tether hryvnia trading volumes. Tether, the world's largest stablecoin by market value, offers price stability in the often volatile crypto markets by maintaining a one-to-one peg with the US dollar. All right, let's take a look at some of our top stories. The Russian central bank raising its key interest rate to 20% from 9.5% in a desperate move to save the spiraling ruble, as major countries cut off support to Moscow amid its invasion of Ukraine. The ruble opened 40% lower against U.S. dollars Monday, the European Central Bank saying Russia's state-owned Sberbank is falling or likely to fail. Russian citizens are queuing at ATMs to withdraw cash, but as CoinDesk reporter Anna Badikova told us Thursday, many machines have run out of cash. Meanwhile, the Ukraine government's call for crypto donations to resist the Russian invasion and provide aid to those affected has been embraced by the crypto community, with nearly 20 million raised in Ether and Bitcoin. On-chain data showing FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried donating $250,000 in Tether and Chain.com CEO Deepak Taplial donating slightly more in Ether. Binance is donating $10 million to Ukrainian refugees and opening a crowdfunding project called Humanity First, Ukraine Emergency Relief Fund, which has a target of almost $20 million. And Bitcoin, the world's largest cryptocurrency by market cap, regaining the key psychological threshold over $41,000, even as the Russia-Ukraine war continues to deteriorate. Joining us now to discuss is Mauricio Di Bartolomeo. Hi there, Mauricio, thanks for joining us from Ledn. So Bitcoin is bouncing. Is it becoming a safe haven in times of war?
Thanks for having me, Christine. It's a great question. I think the price action that you're seeing today, and especially the charts that you were just presenting now with the spikes in volumes, is really showing that we're seeing a flight to what used to be the safety of the U.S. dollar is seemingly in some ways turning into a flight into the safety of crypto. And I think this speaks to a few things. It speaks to, one, uncertainty is relative in the sense that, sure, Bitcoin has volatility in terms of price, but right now, if you're a person in Ukraine or in Russia, there's a lot more uncertainty around, how restricted potentially your banks are going to be or how available your banking system is going to be. And so we're seeing that in some cases, they're opting for Bitcoin, which many ways gives them, the security of a bearer instrument in the sense that they can do self-custody, but they also have the option to very quickly potentially interact with world-class financial services around the world.
We also see Bitcoin is rising more than ETH, more than other coins. Usually it's the other way around. I wonder why do you think that is?
I think, again, it goes back to, if you think about the flight to safety in the crypto world, the safest asset in terms of perception, brand, how long it's been around, how robust the network is by and large Bitcoin. And I think that in times of uncertainty, when there is so much uncertainty around you, people will go to, I guess, the brand that they trust and know the most, which is Bitcoin around the world.
Right. So Ledn is a trading platform, and there's an interesting debate on Twitter right now directed at exchanges, trading platforms, and such. We have a tweet from Mikhailo Fedorov, who's the Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine and Minister of Digital Transformation. He wrote asking all major crypto exchanges to block addresses of Russia users. It's crucial to freeze not only the addresses linked to Russian and Belarusian politicians, but also to sabotage ordinary users. I wonder, what do you think?
Listen, in times of conflict, it's understandable that there are a lot of people that wish that companies could act in a certain way. I think that it's very important for all centralized entities and exchanges that to work very closely with their governments, because the governments are the ones that can very quickly identify these bad actors and very quickly provide and update the instructions so that we can in turn monitor those accounts. So I think that the drive should be towards the politicians that can in fact identify and highlight these, because otherwise it's very difficult for any other sort of private group to start identifying potentially suspicious behavior and adjudicating that decision onto that private entity. I think we have to lean heavily on our governments, and they have to work very tightly with the Ukraine so that we can ensure to protect and stop any kind of bad behavior or bad actors.
Yeah, I'll just point to this. We have Kraken CEO Jesse Powell, who wrote back saying, "I understand the rationale for this request, but despite my deep respect for the Ukrainian people, cannot freeze the accounts of our Russian clients without a legal requirement to do so. Russians should be aware that such a requirement could be imminent." And I suppose at the core of this is the argument and the ethos in the crypto community that, decentralization of cryptocurrencies is key to independence. It has that libertarian ethos that, you need some sort of self-sovereignty, and that runs core to crypto and Bitcoin. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think what's been highlighted, and I think these events continue to show, is that there is a lot of education that still needs to happen in terms of the trade-offs and the ways in which you can hold Bitcoin. A lot of people, in many situations, it would be beneficial for people to understand and be comfortable with self-custody, because depending on where in the world you are, unfortunately, sometimes these rules that have that the governments have to enact, they can sometimes be a blanket decision. So, for example, like there's some sanctions that take over entire countries, like the ones in North Korea, for instance, where nobody can service those clients. And not to go into a case that is so extreme, but there are instances in some U.S. states where a lot of residents cannot access a lot of services, and so therefore they have limited options as to how they can hold their Bitcoin. So I think that there sure are trade-offs in the ways that Bitcoin can be held, and I think we need to continue pushing education so that people understand the trade-offs and they're not caught in a vulnerable situation.
Yeah, in the case of Ledn, you are a Canadian-based financial services firm, and in Canada, you were recently tested when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called on the Emergencies Act to cut funding from truckers protesting COVID restrictions. I wonder, what was the role of trading platforms in Canada when that situation arrived?
Yeah, Christine, and that's a perfect example of essentially a similar situation in which the Canadian government enacted what's called the Emergencies Act, and they very quickly identified an additional set of individuals and addresses. And in this case, they updated the list of addresses and individuals that companies have to check through FinTrack, which is the FinCEN equivalent in the United States. The impact was very limited. For example, like at Ledn, none of our clients were impacted or have not been impacted to date. The Emergencies Act has been lifted, but some bank accounts were impacted. Some bank accounts were frozen. My understanding is that they are in the process of being unfrozen. But again, just to highlight, that is in theory what the due process should look like for exchanges. The government updates the list of suspicious activity or individuals, and then the exchanges then have to filter through and make sure that none of their users are either themselves in that list or interacting with anyone on that list.
If The global financial powers that be decide to isolate, and they are isolating Russia. Do you foresee a flight to Bitcoin, a flight to other cryptocurrencies within Russia?
Yeah, it's interesting, Christine, what's happening, because what I've been paying attention to is the fact that typically in times of conflict, what you see rise is the dollar index, and typically gold you see rise as well. The dollar index has remained pretty flat this time around, and I think that it's interesting that where you would see the flight to safety in the US dollar, which theoretically would be Russia, I think what they're seeing is what you're seeing is a group of people that are not necessarily too keen to fly to the safety of the US dollar and are feeling perhaps a little bit safer going into something like Bitcoin in the current context. I think right now, what we're seeing in the markets, at least my impression, is that you're seeing a bit of a knee jerk from this rush of demand from Russia and Ukraine to buy Bitcoin. But I think inevitably, if this conflict prolongs and goes for long enough, conflict puts a damper on markets overall, generally speaking. And so I do think that it's important to hope that this gets to a quick resolution and then we can keep moving, because if the conflict endures, as much as Russians and Ukrainians are going to be looking for Bitcoin for safety, like their economies are getting crippled, and it's not necessarily good for the long-term growth of the global economy, which will surely put pressure on then global GDPs, etc. So I think it's a great sign of hope for the people of Ukraine, and hopefully the good people in Russia that are still left and want to not have anything to do with what's happening, a way to protect themselves. But hopefully this conflict doesn't draw out too long, because I think that puts headwinds on both Bitcoin and everything.
What do you see in store for price for Bitcoin? What's your short to long-term outlook?
It's a good question. I think what you're seeing in the markets today, also in terms of the rates for U.S. bond yields, is that the yields are coming down quite dramatically. And I think that's the market kind of saying that given the context, the Fed may not be able to be so aggressive in terms of their plans to raise rates. And so, I hate putting a number on Bitcoin, but I do think that we're going to be defending that $30,000 level, that MicroStrategy support line, which is the average purchase price that MicroStrategy has. I think that level should get defended if we ever see that. If not, I think we rally from there.
Interesting. All right, Mauricio, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your insights. That was Ledn co-founder and Chief Strategy Officer, Mauricio Di Bartolomeo. All right, that's it for All About Bitcoin. I'm your host, Christine Lee, and we'll do it all over again tomorrow at 3 o'clock in New York. Also join us tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for First Mover. You're watching CoinDesk TV.